Hi everyone, this is Dr. Raquel Butler from Integrated Veterinary Therapeutics.
And Sophie Vandenberg from Equine Postulate. And we welcome you to the Equine Functional Posture Podcast, your ultimate source for insights into the influence of functional posture on biomechanics, health, and overall well-being of horses.
Whether you're a seasoned equestrian, an equine professional, or simply a horse enthusiast, this podcast is designed to help you understand the critical aspects of functional posture.
Tune in each week as we discuss practical tips, delve into expert interviews, and explore the latest research in the impact of functional posture on equine anatomy, physiology, movement, and more.
Let's create a world where we empower our horses to be in a mental, emotional, and physical balance. Welcome everyone to today's podcast. We're actually talking about the influence of rugging on posture, and it's been inspired by one of the online participants in the EFP current course, the current foundation course, and how she'd noticed that different images of horses, so the ones that were often rugged versus the ones that weren't rugged, and she's noticed this in another course as well, that they had different kind of outlines in front of their withers. So we thought it was a really good topic at the moment. Like we're still in winter here, but coming into spring, and we've both had different experiences with rugs. So how are you going today, Sophie?
Hey Raquel, going really well. This is definitely something that, you think about even when you just drive down the road and you see horses rugged in different situations, and just thinking about, the aim behind what you're looking for when you choose a rug, when you use a rug, when you use a rug, and all those different points.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something that, historically, it was just something I was brought up doing, rugging, and I don't really remember thinking about the types of rugs I was putting on my horses. It was just you bought the size of the rug and that was it. And, it's thinking about why we rug, and often, it can be relating to warmth. It can be relating to keeping horses clean. I find that's a really big reason that people rug. And it can be convenience. And, I remember someone said to me at the start of the season, so I take my horses' rugs off as often as I possibly can. And it's rare that they've had it on probably more this year because I was away. And it's easier for Brett, and it was really cold and miserable. And they don't have a heap of shelter. But every day I try to take it off. And but there are a lot of people who in winter, once winter comes around, the rugs stay on, and they stay on for the entire winter. And what we want to discuss is, well, what influence does that have on your horse's posture? Like, are you kind of undoing things, especially through the thoracic sling area? So, like, what kind of things have you? So, well, what was one important thing that you said to me before?
So an important thing that I said, so I did actually admit to the fact that having worked on a thoroughbred stud, I have put on and taken off a lot of rugs, but I've never owned or used one myself. And I will admit, everyone looked at me strangely the first time I went to put one on, and it didn't really clock for me to have this very important safety checklist in my head of crossing the back leg straps. And I was quite unsure. And I had to, my boss was like, "You want me to stand here and watch you put a rug on for the first time?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely, please." So definitely, yeah, for me, rugs are not something that I have used personally because I have not had a horse that needed one. And I was unwilling to go through the rigmarole when I didn't have a specific aim that I needed to buy one for or use one. So yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know how common that would be. I think most people have rugs or even keep them, so I've read, for emergencies, things for like, if you have a horse who has an accident and they go into shock and they need something warm, which is, a cool consideration. And I have thought about that myself. But yeah, I've never used a rug personally.
Yeah, and it also depends where you keep your horses as well. So, like, we'll go into a bit more on that. But what kind of influences have you seen on posture and movement with rugging?
Quite a lot. So there's lots of different, well, I mean, we'll kind of get into it anyway, but there's so many different things that you can observe in a rug, and they're a reflection of the way that the rug is interacting with your horse's body. So, you think about the way that the rug wraps around the body. It comes often, sometimes it goes up the neck all the way to the pole, and some rugs have a face cover as well, and an ear cover. It wraps around the neck. It comes around the front of the horse's chest. It comes all the way along their back over the rump, covers the tail in some cases, sometimes with a really heavy, tail flap that I think actually can also cause a bit of a, tension if the horse has to lift. Some of them look really heavy or they get wet. It comes down the sides of the horse around their barrel and belly. You have straps that go between their legs, sometimes underneath their belly. And of course, you have rug systems that I did see, having grown up in the tropics, that essentially cover the whole horse's whole body. Like, they go down their legs, they come underneath their body and, go all the way around their head as bug protection for really sensitive horses. So you can influence nearly everywhere on the horse's body, because anytime you introduce something, you're going to bring awareness to that space. You might be bringing pressure, sometimes inappropriately. But personally, I think the biggest one that I see generally is shoulder restriction. So often you see a bit of rubbing on shoulders, one side, sometimes two, which is an indicator that you've got some rug asymmetry in the way that it's on the body. And you can see that in the way the horse moves, the way that their thoracic sling gets a bit restricted and jammed up, and sometimes also the way that they move before and after the rug goes on. It's quite a strong influence. What are things that you would see through, popping a rug on?
Yeah, well, I've had lots of experience with rugs.
Yeah.
So, and it's been really interesting. So, especially when I had Patch, because she was little, but she had a really high wither, and she would be, and she also had quite a lot of dysfunction through her thoracic sling already, and so I remember when I put the rugs on her initially how sensitive her wither became. So she would get really twitchy, and I've had horses like this where they get really twitchy in their wither. You can barely touch it without the skin sensitivity. And so, to me that's causing a lot of irritation. And so I had, so then she had to have, the rugs with a lift, and that made her a lot better. And then I would just take it off as often as I could. So that's one thing with the sensitivity. I've also seen horses that get wither flattening, and so their withers across the top of those spinous processes become really flattened and these are often horses that have a lot of rugs on, so there's a lot of weight on the wither. And so it causes a lot of actual wither dysfunction and thickening through there, and kind of influences the ligaments coming across the top. Like with Jelly, he had a really high wither too when I first got him, and so he was really sensitive to rugs. And I had to have a wither lift for him. But interestingly, this year I haven't had to have a wither lift, and he's probably been the most comfortable I've seen him in rugs, which to me is an indicator of where he's at kind of posturally. But the other aspect of that is getting the dip in front of the wither. I think that's a big one. Like when you see that big dip in front of the wither, you've got to ask how the rugs are sitting in that space, and then how that's influencing their ability to use their thoracic sling. And then also the swelling across the front of the chest. So where rugs are like pulling back, especially rugs that slip back, which they're not well fitting if they're slipping back that much. And I do have a client who bought these beautiful like little cushions that she kind of sits in there. I can't remember what they're called now, but they sit across the strap and they just give a little bit of protection from the strap. And so yeah, they're like a little square cushion. So I think that can be really useful. But if a horse is getting a lot of chest swelling, there's a reason, and it can be it's their posture or the fit of the rug relative to their posture. And so it's not going to be comfortable if they're constantly getting that rubbing across there. And, we talked about before, how like clothes that we wear or socks, when you've got socks on and your socks roll down and they get under your shoe and then you have to put up with that all day. That's kind of similar to a rug, pulling back on you all the time. And I'll just share a story about Jelly. So Jelly, it's very communicative these days. And I put a liner under his rug, and the liners have no darts in them. And so they're very restrictive. And it's happened a few times now. But every time it happens, I think, oh, what is wrong with you? He's like, I don't want to move. And then when he does move, he moves like with his front legs as if like, I can't move. And the first time it happened, I thought he tied up because he has a history of tying up. And then I thought that maybe his feet were really sore because he just had his feet trimmed. And I was like, what the hell? And then I realized it was the liner under the rug and that he just felt so restricted through that front end. And so if you think about a horse then spending the day or days like that where they just feel so restricted, and then they're, whenever they're moving around the paddock, they're moving in this restricted, uncomfortable posture. That's 24 hours of the day for however many days, if you leave the rug on for weeks, like that's setting them up for such bad posture.
Strong. Yeah, and it's interesting. We've had discussions with, especially the one that we had with Lily Wilson, the vet from the UK, where we talked about how essential it is the management that your horse has, because movement begets movement and the influences on their posture throughout the day. So, we've had episodes on feeding positions, on introducing variable movement for your horses, on the use of introducing more movement as opposed to less, even sometimes in cases where your horse might have a slight injury. You've battled, dealing with Jelly, where he's had small twinges, but he has improved so much over time that it's better for you to keep him moving. So when you have a horse who's out there being influenced for so many hours of the day, you're having a really, really strong influence. It's not something that you're going to simply make up for if you're trying to ride them well in a 1 or 2 hour session. And it's not something you can outmanage with, like just good hoof work or getting body work all the time. It's a movement pattern that's constantly being reinforced is something that's going to show up really strongly in your horse's pattern of movement. And that is going to contribute to their posture, which is such a big part of their well-being and their welfare.
Yeah. So, and there are some other things that you can see with rugs too. Like recently, Jelly's rug was slipping to one side. And so I'm like, oh, like usually all my horses' rugs stay perfect. So if they start slipping to one side and you have a horse that, there's the discomfort in that because now it's pulling on their shoulders, pulling on their hind end, pulling on the belly straps. But the other thing is that that's showing up an asymmetry in their posture. And so when he started to do that, I'm like, oh, what has he done? Like, what has he injured himself, again, because his rugs hadn't been slipping and then they started to slip. So if you're combating a slipping rug, you need to look at like it goes the other way as well. Like you need to look at how the horse's posture is influencing the rug fit, but then you want to optimize the rug fit for the horse's posture. And then you also need to consider nerve pain. So like Henry, he's probably not too bad at the moment, but he's gone through times where he's like, I hate rugs. I don't want a rug on. And the reason I believe for him is because he gets a lot of nerve pain in his front end. And so I've had nerve pain in my neck where I don't even want my hair to touch it. Like anything touching it on my neck is just so irritating. So if a horse has that and then they've got this rug constantly rubbing on the base of their neck or through their shoulders, like for some horses it can just be really, and that might be the horse that's grumpy about you putting the rug on because it's irritating them around that, like they're getting nerve irritation around that front end.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many ways you can have an influence, and it might be a good thing, that you can have a bit of a metric for having a look at your horse too. Like there's a line that goes down the rug, so if you have a quick look most of the time, be like, okay, yes, I am consistently seeing from behind that that the rug is shifting over, or that's going forward or pulling back. There's something there to investigate.
Yeah, definitely. And when you think about rug fit, like I was at a clinic last year with a lady who makes rugs, and it was really interesting. We had the discussion about like she was really particular about how rugs should be made to fit the horses, and she was saying that often the shoulder darts are too far back, and so they need to be further forward to allow more of that shoulder movement. And so I guess you can look at the way your horse trots or canters with their rug on. Like obviously they're not doing that often, but or walking, like can you see pulling through the
Yeah.
rug, or does it allow the horse to move with freedom? Because if it's constantly kind of pulling on them, then it's creating a restriction in there. So I'm always fascinated when I look at people's rugs and I'm looking at like, oh, that looks like it fits really well. And then it's always the really expensive ones. So like,
It is.
I look it up like, oh, that's a $700 rug. No wonder it fits well. But you do get 10 years out of those rugs. We're not saying not to necessarily rug, but we do need to consider that a horse's thermoneutral zone is 5 degrees to 25 degrees. So in that zone of 5 to 25 degrees, and there's studies to show this, they can thermoregulate themselves. So, and even we have participants in our EFP course who live in the snow, and like people who don't rug in, I was talking to someone last week from Canada, and there it gets down to like -20, and their rugging is very minimal. So in Australia, we have a tendency to over rug. And that's something I've really tried not to do with Ellie. And Brett, I've been like fighting Brett with it because he's like, but she needs a rug. She's, everyone else has one on. But it's for me really important to continue for her metabolic system to be stimulated, because she got a bit fat last year, and so that's a stress on her metabolic system. And so I want her to be able to regulate her body temperature, and unless it's windy and raining and she doesn't have shelter, like then she is shivering, and that has a negative effect on her body because she has some injuries. But unless it's windy and raining, she can keep herself warm enough all the time. And then I take rugs off every single day for my horses as much as I can. Like, when it's sunny, all rugs are off. And it's annoying, they're dirty. But, over the years, I've chosen their welfare over cleanliness, because I just see that they're so much happier when they have rugs off as often as possible. They get a better winter coat, they get a better summer coat, they can scratch with each other, so they get that mutual grooming, which I think is so important, that horses have the opportunity to groom themselves and
Yeah.
groom other horses.
There's also an opportunity there for some agency as well. There's quite a few people who have now, there's one in who went through equine science, and she had a really great system that she shared, where you know, she had a very specific set of cues beforehand. So just like her rugging times were dictated, you know, leaving for and then coming home from work. But she was able to set up a cue to basically say to her horses, I am in the process of approaching you with a rug. You know, it's a very specific sequence. And the horse has the opportunity to stand still, walk away, or come towards her looking for a rug. And so she observed there were horses that would choose to say, yes, I definitely want a rug. No, I don't want a rug tonight. And she said that they had a very good ability to predict, not perfect, but good ability to predict how the weather was going to go that evening. And she said it was, you know, when they felt that it was rainy or that it was very windy, she would get a much stronger, like, yes, I would like to have my rug on. She did say she'd invested in getting rugs that fitted them very well, you know, so that she was trying to make sure that, you know, it was just the choice. Do you want the warmth and the comfort of a rug, or do you not want it? And she said that she had a couple of horses that when she started asking, it was a hard no all the time. And when she'd go out later, even when it was cold, no, I don't want a rug on, they would always walk away. And so being very specific, I will never chase you and make you put the rug on. The horse is like, oh, I have a total freedom of choice. And she said the level of self-control or agency that you offer back is very empowering, and it improves your relationship, which is, you know, another step towards, you know, better communication with your horse about how they feel. So it can be an opportunity too to ask your horse their preference of rugs.
Yeah, I've done that. Like Henry, he is often a no, like, but he must be fairly comfortable in his rug this year because there's been more yeses with the rug that I have on him this year. So maybe, yeah, his posture is a bit better or something. But Ellie was really funny because if it's raining and windy, she almost like pushes into you, like, hurry up, get the rug on. Like she will almost run to you and it's like, just get it on me. And then she'll pull it on herself. So like I'll put it over and she'll grab it and pull it around herself. And so, you know, I don't know if she would say, I don't know if she would say no at the moment because it's been a novelty for her to have the rug on, like when it's really cold. But yeah, Mooney definitely Henry will definitely say yes or no.
You know, sorry, just to interrupt you, there's a good point here too. There are so many horses that will always pull their rug off, and people call them a Houdini of rugs, but they have a super specific skill that they've worked out that they can shimmy out of their rug, you know. And I have watched the funniest videos of horses. I swear, probably a YouTube compilation that I was laughing over, where horses, you know, very intentionally, like they get their leg out of their leg straps and then they basically like shimmy and shiver and bring the whole rug forward over their neck and pull it off. And then they, you know, flounce around like, yeah, I got my rug off.
I know a horse like that, and she will do it only when it's not been done right, you know, like she's too hot. And she will take her rug off. She'll also let herself out of the stable, and you know, she's very clear in her level of communication. But yeah, they'd often come out and be like, how did she do it? Because all the straps were done up. But yeah, like you said, she obviously got the back legs out and then she shimmied herself out of it. So yeah, she would do it if it wasn't right. If she was too hot, too many rugs, she'd take it off herself. So some horses are like super smart.
Yes.
But there is an indication where I do think horses need rugs, and that's with the arthritic horse. So, you know, I've got some clients' horses that are quite old, and last year they didn't rug them, and their bodies deteriorated quite significantly during the winter. And one horse, he didn't like being rugged, and I think because he had so much pain in his body. But this year they have rugged those horses, and it's just one rug, just, you know, at night, one rug. They take them off every day. The difference in those horses this year, I mean, they've had some HA and some postural work and some different things, but like their bodies have held so much better, and it's been a colder winter. So, you know, your arthritic horse or your stiff horse, like Jelly, with his muscle condition, it doesn't work for him to get cold. He's better now. He can tolerate it much better than he used to. And I have another client's horse who, we suspect has PSSM. She's just so much happier when she's warm. So there are specific horses where, rugging is very valuable. And like 1 year Henry was just losing weight, and he has really bad arthritis. He was losing weight. I was increasing his feed, but I just added a woolen rug, and straight away his weight went up. So, just because his body was really arthritic, he was really feeling the cold. So there are those situations. However, I then take it off every day. So that we need to consider rugging to be beneficial. But the other aspect is really, when do we need to rug, do you think, just in general?
So, what you just said about,
Yep.
arthritic horses, warmth, bring that in. Also, if your horse is exposed to weather outside of the thermoneutral zone, particularly when it's very unusual weather,
Yeah, like out of the blue, like really windy and really cold. Yeah.
and really cold. And sometimes that's quite shocking, especially if, there's a bit to consider in terms of lots of different factors. What's your next week going to look like? Are you about to go to a competition? Are you trying to keep your horse feeling as, warm and mobile as possible? Could they have a few days out in the paddock where it's, a bit cold and windy, and that's really not going to affect them much? Other things to consider, like you said, putting weight on Henry, rug is, there's a saying, it's like a rug is worth a feed a day. I think there's a saying for it, but that's the general idea, is that if you have any metabolic stress because of the weather, you can reduce that and increase your horse's energy efficiency so that they can gain a little bit of weight.
Your golden oldies.
Yeah. And so those are important things to consider. Other times might be if your horse likes it, like what we just said, if your horse decides that they want comfort, for bugs, when that's a terrible, if that's, if you're juggling things that are difficult, maybe a rug isn't perfect, but there's something else that's going to influence them more in those situations.
Years ago, we had really bad mozzies, and I'd avoided putting rugs on Ellie until that point, but the mozzies were causing hives, and so like they had to all have on those bug rugs because the mozzies were just so bad that it was causing a lot of negative effects on them. And so that was one time where, because usually I would have the rugs off as much as possible in summer. And the other thing to realize actually while I'm on summer is that when it's hot, a cotton rug is not cooler than not having a rug. Like their ability to cool, they need airflow. They can produce sweat, and then the airflow and the evaporation of the sweat cools them down. And so when it's really hot, the best option for 99% of horses is to have no rugs on, so long as they have shade and, hosing them down. But yeah, rugs don't keep horses cool, and that's an important thing to recognize. So what recommendations do you have for rugging?
One would be, if you have considered that your horse needs a rug for whatever amount of time, or whatever reason, that getting a well-fitting rug is a good investment for their posture. So, I mean, you made some comments that you had come across a rug fitter who really didn't think that most generic rugs are good enough for the standard horse because the darts, or the shoulder width, or the buckle placement. They're not a reflection of how individual horses are, and how, it's like choosing a hoodie that doesn't feel nice and it's always pulling back and the zipper bumps into your throat, things like that. So getting a well-fitting rug, and also, doing some investigations to really figure out, does this fit my horse? What, the things we talked about or the observations you can make on a day-to-day basis to evaluate the rug you have and maybe think about, what would be more suitable or what could be improved.
Yeah, and then minimizing the number of rugs. So, most people would have a little fit, because I don't have cotton rugs on my horses, and I just chuck on their synthetic rug at night, and because I want to minimize the number of rugs that they have on. So Jelly's the only horse that has 2 rugs on this year, and otherwise I just chuck on a rug at night. And one of another ABM vet, she noticed that horses that even just have one well-fitting cotton rug is often sufficient, and that even when it rains and it's windy, she noticed that they can still fluff up under the cotton rug, and that the cotton rug will dry really quickly, and it also offers that wind protection. So just a well-fitting cotton rug. If you can't take rugs on and off, then that may be your best option, to provide a bit of wind and rain protection throughout the winter, because leaving rugs on and then they get itchy and sweaty is very irritating for the horse. And yeah, so if you can't take them off, then I would consider not rugging at all as a better option, or just a really well-fitting cotton rug.
Yeah. I was just going to mention again too, the fact that if one of your primary aims is warmth, you may be able to give away the rug and increase your horse's roughage. So the heat production from the hindgut in the horses is a huge source of warmth for them. So, when it's very cold, highly digestible forms of roughage or any hay at all really is a fantastic way to add warmth for them.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
in cold weather, I really think honestly it's a reflection of really good welfare to make sure that your horses have access to roughage.
Extra hay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just checking if the rug is rubbing, and rather than just putting on a bib, or or kind of doing it from that perspective, ask why the rug is rubbing or slipping, or why they don't like the rug. Like, have a look at the rest of their posture, and how it's kind of fitting, how they're moving with the rug as well. So can they move well? Do they move as well with the rug on as they do with the rug off? Because like Sophie said, that's time that they're working on their posture that you don't have to do. So if it's in a negative state, then you can't make up for that because of the amount of time that they're wearing the rug. So really observing, and I mean, we go on all the time about improving your observation skills. Like, the more you can observe how your horse moves with and without a rug, then that's going to give you really valuable feedback, because you don't want them to look restricted when they have the rug on.
Definitely. And it's worth, I think, checking, what does it look like when I put the rug on? What does it look like a little while later? And what does it look like, a bit later on? Because sometimes it's just shifting and shifting and shifting and shifting. And you do see sometimes comments from people who are asking questions in general about rugs. And they'll be like, it looks really good when I put it on, there's no stretch, etc. But when I go to take it off, my horse has a fluttery wither, there's like
Yeah, it's like pulled really bad into their...
yeah, and things like, yeah. So like checking when you put it on, but also when you take it off, when it's been, moving around for a while. And I would say also having a feel underneath, how hot is the horse under there? And of course,
They don't have to be like toasty warm.
no. So yeah, there's lots of things to consider and observe, and even just having a few things that it's so easy. I mean, most of them are visual and just like you get to swipe your hand under. So just thinking about that with your horses, and keep watching and keeping an eye on how they move.
And then just taking them off as often as you can, letting them have free rug off time. Yep, I know it's annoying, they can get dirty, but giving them that free time to move without any restrictions, even if it's well fitting, it can still be annoying. And the mutual grooming aspect, the grooming of themselves, it's actually a really important just welfare thing for them to do is to groom. And so, yeah, giving them as much time as you can with their rugs off and considering why you rug, what your aim is. Is it an age related because your horse is elderly and stiff? Like I could not rug Mooney. Like he would lose so much weight in the winter and it would create so much stress for him. He has such a thin coat. He wind sucks. And yeah, if his rug's not warm enough, I really notice the difference with him. Whereas Ellie, I'm trying to keep the rugs off her as much as possible. Like she only needs it if it's really terrible weather. Monitor your posture, and yeah, invest in a well-fitting rug. I think
Yeah.
that's the main things. Anything
Yeah,
else?
I just want to say that you can be creative too. Like I have one bodywork client that she shows her horses and her horses don't love having a rug on, but she it's important for her horses in the things that she's doing with them that their coat looks sleek and shiny. And so she puts a rug on for the 24 hours before a show, as opposed to doing it all the time. And between a bath and having that rug on, their coat comes up beautifully. So there are ways to be creative, because having a rug on also, often the consideration has been that when you keep the horse warm, that they will grow less of a winter coat. But what actually happens is that you get such a crushing of the piloerection response in the horse that their coat looks really flat and sleek and shiny. But for the most part, even if you send them out, eventually they're going to come back all fluffy and fluffed up. So there's something to be said for being creative with getting around, whatever issues you have with your rugs.
Yeah, that's what I'll do, like in summer especially, because my horses will have their rugs off all summer unless the bugs are really bad.
Yeah.
Then if I want to take them somewhere, yeah, I just wash them, rug them for 24 hours beforehand and they look amazing. And I mean, looking amazing comes back to general health anyway. Having a nice coat is general metabolic health, and not rugging improves metabolic health. So,
And
like,
hydration of the fascia. Like when you
yeah,
have a
and
less
the
restricted.
piloerection, the ability of the
Yeah.
coat to actually respond to being cold, like that's a healthy metabolic response that we actually want to promote in them, and it can reduce things like having, insulin resistance and Cushing's, and as it can influence that because we're just trying to keep the whole system responsive to changes in the environment. Like that's a natural mechanism, is to be able to cool themselves and warm themselves up, in that thermoneutral zone of 5 to 25 degrees. So yeah, hopefully this chat has just made you think about the influence of rugs on your horse's posture, and perhaps think about how you could reduce those rugs, or look for better fitting ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining myself, Dr. Raquel Butler, and Sophie Vanderberg in today's podcast. Enjoy your horse time. Please subscribe to the Equine Functional Posture podcast so you don't miss our weekly episodes, and give us a 5-star rating so we can continue to share more valuable insights.
And we'll see you in the next exciting episode.